life was extremely difficult these past few weeks. During the times that I have traveled to different places, there has been an otherworldly energy that follows me every night. This never used to happen before in my travels, but lately I felt as if I'm reliving someone's nightmare and I am entrapped in various flashbacks. Some of these flashbacks I didn't even recognize as my own. Nonetheless, I continued head-on with my travels and kept my weary thoughts in the back of my head. During the night, I did my weekly routine of getting more gas for the run. I always made sure I had enough, as my journeys were usually long. As I entered the shop, an eerie chill swept over me, shivers went down my spine. Something didn't feel right. But as much as I wanted to make a U-turn and find another shop, my GPS told me that this would be the only gas station I could reach, with the next one being 500 miles away. I went to find the attendant, but the shop was eerily empty. The dim, flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast long, sinister shadows across the deserted aisles. Shelves that should have been stocked with snacks and drinks were barren, covered in a layer of dust. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" There was no response, only the faint hum of the refrigerators and the creaking of the building as if it were whispering secrets from its long-forgotten past. I felt a growing unease, but I had to continue. Walking up to the counter, I noticed a small bell with a handwritten sign that read, "Ring for service." I hesitated for a moment, then reached out and gave it a gentle ring. The sound echoed through the empty store, and I waited, my heart pounding. "I need some help, please," I called out. Minutes passed, but still, no one appeared. I decided to take matters into my own hands and began searching for a gas pump that I could activate myself. As I stepped outside, I noticed the desolation of the gas station's surroundings. Weeds had overgrown the cracked pavement, and the pumps themselves looked ancient, relics of a bygone era. I found an old pump with a digital display and inserted my credit card, hoping it would work. To my surprise, the screen flickered to life, and I started pumping gas into my car. The eerie feeling persisted, but I chalked it up to exhaustion and my overactive imagination. I was sure that nothing bad would happen, since my card seemed to work, right? After filling up, I returned to the store to pay. But once again, there was no sign of an attendant. I walked over to the counter and spotted a weathered, dusty cash register. There was no modern card reader, only a slot for cash. My stomach turned as I felt the chilling atmosphere yet again, this time the larger gusts of wind almost knocking out my entire body. I wasn't sure if I should pay without finding a cashier or manager first. I noticed the staff door was unlocked. With some hesitation, I opened the door and was greeted by another gust of wind knocking me over. Only this time, I could feel my soul freezing into ice. My body shuddered with unease, my heart beating rapidly out of my chest before I mustered up the courage to walk inside. I used the flashlight on my phone to find the flight of stairs, but then soft whispers completely stopped me from my tracks. "Don't go down, you don't want to find out," the whispers repeated over and over again. I desperately tried to figure out where these whispers were coming from. If I was hallucinating, I would say they were coming directly from the walls. Sliding on my heels from the sudden shock, I made my first U-turn and decided to leave this place once and for all. This was not my business to deal with, and the last thing I needed in my mind was to drag an evil entity that would continue to haunt me for the rest of my journey. With a growing sense of foreboding, I pulled out a few bills from my wallet and left them on the counter, along with a note that said, "For gas. Sorry I missed you." As I turned to leave, I noticed a stack of old, yellowing newspapers on a nearby shelf. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked one up. The date in the newspaper was from over a decade ago, and the headline read, "Gas Station Attendant Vanishes Mysteriously." The article detailed how the gas station had been abandoned suddenly, with no trace of the attendant who had worked there for years. Why would an article that has been written a decade ago still be here in a gas station? I read the rest of the newspapers left behind, my mind working to figure out the pieces to this mystery that I set upon myself tonight. Finally, my heart raced as I realized the implications. I had just filled up my car at a gas station that had been abandoned for over a decade, yet I had a receipt dated for that very night. Panic set in as I hurried back to my car, the engine roaring to life as I sped away from that haunted gas station. The otherworldly energy that had been following me on my travels suddenly felt more real than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far more profound and unsettling than I could ever have imagined. Once I returned home, I did a quick Google search on the gas station, but nothing came up. Nothing. At all. I had hoped that everything that I experienced in the gas station was a figment of my imagination, that it was only my demons taunting me yet again. In the end, I had to put an end to my travels. I will never forgive the malevolent energy that forced me to give up on the thing that I loved the most, all because of that abandoned gas station. Story 2. I've owned the gas station for years, a quaint little place on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of business where you knew your regular customers by name and saw the same faces every day. Life was peaceful, and business was good until the mysterious vandal struck. It all began one chilly autumn morning. I arrived at the station to open up and start my day, only to discover that one of the gas pumps had been vandalized. At first, I thought it might have been a random act of mischief by some bored teenagers, as there were plenty of times the teenagers created vandalism in other shops. That included the neighboring sweet shop 5 miles away, who had a knacker for bribing people to pay them more than they owed. However, when I approached the pump, I realized that this was something different. Strange symbols, like intricate hieroglyphics, were etched into the metal with precision. It was as if the vandal had used some ancient script I couldn't recognize. My gut feeling told me that even though the teenagers were smart, they couldn't have possibly known how to write these sinister symbols, yet alone read them. Beads of sweat trickled down my neck as I could feel someone's presence over the vandalized property. The police were called, and they reviewed the security camera footage. What they found sent chills down my spine. On the grainy footage, a shadowy figure could be seen moving around the gas pump in the dead of night. The vandal wore a long coat that billowed like a cloak, obscuring their identity. They moved with a fluid grace, their hands deftly carving the mysterious symbols into the pump's surface. The only color etched onto its face was the red eyes that bore straight at the camera, longing for something that I couldn't possibly make out at that moment. I watched in disbelief as the figure finished their work and disappeared into the darkness. The police were just as baffled as I was. They couldn't identify the vandal, and the symbols defied any easy interpretation. It was as if this person was using a language that had long been forgotten by the world. They asked if I knew anyone that would commit such a thing at my gas station, but I explained that only a few locals ever came to my station and I had good connections with them. They promised to increase patrols in the area, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. "Is there anybody out there?" I called out, hoping that whatever was lurking in the shadows would show themselves, but they never did. Weeks passed, and the vandal struck again and again, always under the cover of night exactly at 3 a.m. Each time, a different pump was targeted, and the symbols grew more complex, more intricate. I became obsessed with deciphering their meaning, spending late nights poring over books on ancient languages and symbols. But the further I researched, the more confusing it became. Some of the words I managed to decipher were vague, to the point even a philosopher would never be able to identify the true meaning of them. As the vandalism continued, rumors began to circulate in the small town. Some said it was the work of a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. Others believed it was a bizarre form of art by a local eccentric. But I knew better. There was something sinister about those symbols, something that whispered of a hidden world beyond our understanding. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself staring at the security camera footage once more. I really needed answers to end this debacle, and this had to happen now. This time round, I noticed something I hadn't before. As the vandal finished their work and started to walk away, a small, glimmering amulet fell from their pocket. It lay on the ground, forgotten, as the figure disappeared into the night. Zooming into the object, I noticed it was an amulet, covered with the same engravings that I saw the very first night of the vandalization on the gas pumps. I rushed back to my gas station, my heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. I retrieved the amulet and examined it closely. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, an ornate piece of jewelry. I examined more closely to confirm it was the exact symbol that mirrored those etched onto the gas pumps. It was then that a crazy idea began to form in my mind. With the amulet in my possession, I continued my research, delving deeper into the obscure world of ancient symbols and rituals. It took weeks, but I finally found a reference to the symbol on the amulet in a dusty old tome. It was a symbol associated with a secret society that had existed for centuries, a society rumored to possess otherworldly knowledge and powers. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The society was said to hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe, and their symbol was used to mark places of significance. Gas stations, it seemed, were one such location, although the exact purpose remained a mystery. Was I really going to do this? I thought about it a bit further, realizing that I might not have a choice anyways. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Armed with the knowledge I had gained, I waited one fateful night at the gas station, hidden in the shadows. It didn't take long for the vandal to arrive, their cloak billowing in the breeze. As they approached the gas pump, I stepped out of the darkness, holding the amulet aloft. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The vandal froze, their hooded head turning slowly to face me. In the dim light, I could see their eyes widen in recognition as they stared at the amulet I held. Without a word, they reached into their pocket and pulled out a similar amulet, identical to mine. I continued to stare at the confusion etched into their face, worried that there was something else to this puzzling mystery. "How do you have possession of that? You're not meant to take it with you, it was meant to be left for protection." The entity spoke warily. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. The vandal wasn't defacing the pumps, they were trying to protect them, to ward off something that lurked in the shadows. And now, they saw me as a threat, an outsider who had stumbled upon their secret. Before I could react, the vandal muttered an incantation, and the ground beneath us trembled. The gas pumps erupted in a blinding burst of light, and I was thrown to the ground, my vision filled with a kaleidoscope of colors and symbols. When I regained my senses, the gas station was empty, the vandal gone. But the symbols on the pumps were no longer etched in metal, they glowed with an otherworldly energy, a barrier that kept whatever malevolent force they were guarding at bay. With a heavy heart, I left the gas station behind, knowing that I could never fully understand the mysteries that had unfolded there. I knew there was still something out there, but it wasn't my mystery to solve. Story 3. Working the night shift at a gas station was always an eerie experience. The solitude of the graveyard shift left me alone with my thoughts, accompanied only by the faint hum of the coolers and the occasional passing car. Most nights, it was uneventful, but one night in particular, something extraordinary happened that would haunt my thoughts for years to come. It was a moonless night, the kind that cast everything in a shroud of darkness. I was restocking the shelves when the bell above the door chimed, announcing a late-night visitor. I turned to see a figure stumbling into the store, shrouded in tattered clothing and appearing disheveled. My heart quickened as I noticed their wild, desperate eyes. "Please," the stranger implored, "you have to help me. I'm from the future, and I need shelter. Something terrible is about to happen." I blinked in disbelief, sure that I had misheard. "From the future?" I stammered. The stranger nodded vehemently. "Yes, please, you have to believe me. I can explain everything, but there's no time." My mind raced. This had to be some kind of prank or a desperate person seeking refuge. I reached for my phone, intending to call the police to handle the situation. But the stranger's words grew more frantic. No, you can't call them," they pleaded. "You don't understand. They'll be after me, too." I hesitated, torn between disbelief and compassion. Something in the stranger's eyes seemed genuine, like a deep well of fear and desperation. Against my better judgment, I decided to hear them out. I motioned for them to follow me to the corner of the store, away from the security cameras. They began to speak in a hurried whisper, explaining how they had accidentally stumbled upon a time travel experiment gone awry. In their time, a catastrophic event was on the horizon, one that would alter the course of history and bring about untold suffering. They claimed to be a time traveler sent back to prevent this calamity. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself strangely captivated by their story, though still skeptical. Their words were laced with a mix of desperation and conviction that tugged at my conscience. "Please," they concluded, "I just need a place to hide until I can figure out how to stop this. I promise I won't cause any trouble." I decided to take a risk. My sense of empathy overrode my rational doubts, and I agreed to let them stay in the small storage room at the back of the store. It was a dim, cramped space filled with dusty old boxes, but it would serve as a temporary sanctuary. I would have said no otherwise, but I heard too many rumors about time travelers coming to town, and I wanted to figure out if these rumors were true once and for all. I provided the stranger with some blankets and a few bottles of water, urging them to stay quiet and hidden until morning. They nodded in gratitude, and as I left the storage room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just become a character in a bizarre science fiction tale. I returned to my post behind the counter, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the police. The minutes stretched into hours, and as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, I grew increasingly uneasy. The police should have arrived by now. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. A dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation, describing the bizarre visitor and their claims of being from the future. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way and advised me to stay put. Relieved, I hung up and turned my attention back to the store. That's when I noticed it, the security cameras. They hadn't recorded any of the stranger's visit or our conversation in the corner. It was as if the entire encounter had been erased from existence. Panic gripped me as I rushed to check the storage room. To my horror, it was empty, the blankets neatly folded, and the water bottles untouched. There was no sign of the stranger anywhere. I rushed back to the counter, my heart pounding, and that's when I noticed it, the napkin. It lay on the counter, a hastily scrawled message in a language I couldn't understand. It was filled with strange symbols and diagrams, like something out of a sci-fi movie. As I stared at the cryptic message, a chill swept over me. The police arrived shortly after, but when I tried to explain what had happened, they exchanged skeptical glances and dismissed it as a prank or a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. "You must be delirious due to lack of sleep. I've seen it all before," the office claimed, dismissing any of my concerns. I didn't have a chance to explain as they shut the door behind them. But I knew what I had seen, what I had experienced. The visitor from the future was real, and they had left behind a message that held the key to understanding the dire event they had tried to prevent. For years, I obsessed over that message, seeking out experts in cryptography and ancient languages to decipher its meaning. And when the truth finally revealed itself, it was a twist that no one could have anticipated. The message wasn't a warning about a future catastrophe, it was a blueprint for a time travel experiment. The symbols and diagrams were instructions for creating a time machine, a machine that would allow someone to journey through time and change the course of history. The reason why it was so hard to decipher the message at first was because some of the symbols matched those from the infamous cult back in 1989, with slight alterations to throw researchers off if they were to ever encounter the blueprints. I realized then that the visitor from the future had never been a desperate traveler trying to prevent a disaster. They were a renegade scientist attempting to rewrite history for their own gain. And I had unwittingly become a pawn in their dangerous game. But I wasn't going to let them win, not now or ever.